Welcome to Cosmo Talks, where every thought is a star and every conversation a constellation. Have you ever heard of someone believing they were dead? I mean, not just feeling really low, but actually truly believing they don't exist anymore, or that, parts of their body are missing or gone. That's what we're diving into today, this pretty rare and really quite strange condition called Cotard syndrome. People sometimes call it walking corpse syndrome.
Or the delusion of negation, yeah. It's definitely mind-bending. And to try and get our heads around it, we've pulled together info from a bunch of different places. We looked at news articles, people sharing their actual experiences, plus scientific journals focusing on things like nutrition and rehabilitation, psychiatry, neurology, also psychology websites, general health info. We even looked at a Reddit discussion and a pretty helpful YouTube video from a neurologist and psychiatrist.
Right. And our aim here is really to unpack this unusual condition in a way that hopefully sparks your curiosity and helps understand what's actually going on without getting bogged down in super technical medical speak.
Okay, so the absolute core of this is a really, really strong belief. It's not like saying, oh, I feel dead inside today. It's deeper.
Exactly. That core delusion is what defines Cotard's. And it's powerful. Think about Warren McKinley. We read about his case. After a really bad motorbike crash, he flat out said, I believed that I had died. Simple as that. And because of that belief, he stopped eating.
Yeah.
If you genuinely think you're dead, why would you need food, right? That's the kind of stark logic we're talking about.
Wow, it's almost impossible to really imagine holding that belief so firmly. And this isn't something brand new, is it? It's been known for quite a while.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It goes back. The name comes from Jules Cotard, who was a French neurologist. He first wrote about it way back in 1880. He initially called it délire de négation, which basically translates to delirium of negations or things not being there. Delirium of things not being there.
Yeah, and it wasn't actually called Cotard's syndrome until a bit later, 1893, when another doctor, Émile Regis, named it to honor Cotard.
So that original name, delirium of things not being there, sounds like it might be even broader than just feeling dead. Like maybe everything feels gone.
That's a really good point. Cotard's original descriptions were broader, actually. He talked about patients denying not just their own existence, but sometimes the existence of other people or parts of their body or even the whole world. They felt incredibly detached, had bizarre ideas about their bodies changing. Sometimes they'd become mute or wouldn't move. The I am dead belief is obviously key, but yeah, the original concept was even wider.
So this core belief, it can show up in some really specific and frankly kind of unsettling ways then. The sources had some quite vivid examples.
Definitely. It manifests very individually. Like the man in Mexico we read about, he became convinced his genitals had just disappeared. Yeah. And not just that, but also that he had no eyes or heart. He thought they'd somehow been removed when he was in hospital. He even felt his left hand was sort of dead and gone. He's incredibly focused on his own body.
That's such a strange, specific image. And there was also that woman in Portugal after her husband died.
Yes, exactly. She was 66, and she stopped eating to the point where she was severely malnourished. Her belief was that her esophagus and stomach were, stuck together, fused, so food just couldn't pass through. She lost a huge amount of weight before she got help. It really shows how these delusions can have direct, serious physical consequences.
It's heartbreaking. And the examples just keep coming, don't they? Like the woman in Kashmir.
Right, a 28-year-old woman. She was hospitalized because she insisted her liver was rotten and her heart and stomach were completely gone. She even said she couldn't feel her body when she walked, just no sensation.
Goodness. And the British woman, what was her specific belief?
She was 59, and she went for medical help because she was utterly convinced she was actually a rotting corpse and her legs were literally falling off. These examples really drive home how visceral and personal these delusions are.
Okay, now this is where it gets even stranger for me. This idea that someone can believe they're dead, but also feel like they can't die. That sounds like a complete contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? But this paradox, this co-occurrence of being dead and immortal, it's actually a recognized feature. It came up in the YouTube video and other places. The logic seems to be something like, well, I'm already dead, so normal dying, the kind that happens to living people, that doesn't apply to me anymore. They're dead, but still here, walking around. So they can't die again naturally. And sometimes this actually leads to them wanting to be, say, destroyed by fire as the only way they can conceive of finally ceasing this weird undead existence.
So it's not like a comforting immortality at all. It's more like being trapped in some kind of horrifying limbo. That must come with some incredibly intense feelings. What's the emotional side like?
Oh, it's often incredibly bleak. Warren McKinley, again, he described it as a period of absolute darkness, just this profound absence of feeling, of emotion, which made it impossible for him to care about anything.
That lack of caring,
Really?
just feeling nothing, that sounds incredibly isolating.
It really is. Some people talk about feeling like they're in a sort of ghostly waiting room or maybe some kind of strange afterlife. McKinley mentioned that feeling about his time in hospital too. And if you go back to Cotard's original patient descriptions, there can be really powerful delusions of guilt, feeling condemned, like they're being punished for all eternity.
Wow. Okay, so beyond these intense beliefs and feelings, does this stuff show up physically in how people behave?
Yes, absolutely. There are definite physical signs and behaviors often reported. The refusal to eat or drink, like with McKinley and the Portuguese woman, that follows logically if you think you're dead and don't need sustenance. Neglecting personal hygiene is another one Cotard noted early on. Again, if you're a corpse, why bother washing?
The doctor in the YouTube video mentioned something about pain too, didn't they?
That's right, yeah. Some individuals report analgesia, basically not feeling pain or feeling it much less intensely. And in more severe cases, this came up in the video and journals, you can see agitation, sometimes aggression, self-harm is a risk, and unfortunately suicidal tendencies too. There's also that really distressing belief some people have that they actually smell like rotting flesh. And one website mentioned some might not even recognize themselves in a mirror or recognize familiar people.
Gosh, it sounds like an utterly devastating experience, not just for the person themselves, but for everyone around them too. What sort of things tend to trigger this? Or is it linked to other problems? Does it just appear randomly?
It usually doesn't just appear out of the blue, no. It's almost always linked to other underlying issues or major events. Or in McKinley's case, developing after that serious accident and brain injury, that's a pretty clear neurological trigger. But it's very often seen alongside severe depression, particularly depression that has psychotic features, meaning delusions or hallucinations are part of it. Other mental health conditions like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, those are also linked.
So mental health seems to be a major factor. Are there other physical health problems involved too?
Yes, definitely. Certain neurological conditions like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, stroke, brain tumors, epilepsy, they've all been associated with Cotard's. And even some systemic physical illnesses, things like typhoid fever or complications after major surgery like a heart transplant, have occasionally been reported as potential triggers in medical literature.
It's surprising how wide-ranging the potential connections are. We also heard that psychological and social factors can play a role. How do they fit in?
Right. Things like someone's underlying personality traits, their family situation, maybe financial stress, major life events, all these things can sort of shape or perhaps contribute to the development of these nihilistic delusions. It seems to be a really complex interplay between what's happening biologically in the brain, the person's psychological state, and their life circumstances.
It really made you wonder, what are the actual theories for why this happens? What's going on in the brain or mind that leads to such an extreme, bizarre belief?
There are several theories floating around trying to explain it. One idea, which came up in that Mexican study, suggests that maybe a really profound trauma or loss leads to this overwhelming feeling of emptiness, of being disconnected, and this feeling, maybe combined with losing hope and feeling intense guilt, could somehow spiral into the Cotard's delusion. It's like the brain is trying to explain this awful internal state in the most extreme way possible.
That kind of makes a grim sort of sense. If you feel that disconnected, the brain maybe leads to, I must be dead. What about actual physical brain changes?
Yeah, neuroimaging studies have shown some interesting things. Some research points to reduced metabolic activity in brain regions involved in introspection, like self-awareness. There have also been findings related to changes in the size of certain brain areas or damage to the frontal lobe, the part responsible for reasoning, judgment, and behavior. So there's evidence suggesting physical brain differences or malfunctions are involved.
And the psychiatrist on YouTube had that interesting take, linking it to severe depression, right? Can you unpack that a bit?
Yes, his suggestion was that extremely severe depression can sometimes cause these intense feelings of unreality, like you're detached from yourself, that's depersonalization, or the world around you feels unreal, derealization. The Cotard's delusion, then, might be the brain's attempt to create an explanation for these profoundly abnormal perceptions. It's like, why do I feel so unreal and disconnected? Oh, it must be because I'm actually dead. It's a distorted way of making sense of it.
And wasn't there something about the brain's belief evaluation system maybe going wrong?
That's another hypothesis, yeah. It suggests a possible defect, maybe in the frontal cortex again, which normally helps us evaluate beliefs and decide what's plausible or real. If that system isn't working right, it might fail to flag the "I am dead" belief as illogical and impossible.
And we heard about a two-stage model, I think, related to that Portuguese case study.
Right, the psychopathological model. It basically proposes 2 steps. First, there's some kind of abnormal perception or experience maybe stemming from issues in brain areas processing emotion or recognition, like the amygdala or fusiform gyrus. Second, it involves the individual's attributional style, how they tend to explain events. In Cotard's, the theory suggests there's a tendency towards internal attribution, blaming oneself, which fits with those common feelings of guilt and damnation.
So, like, you have a weird feeling, and then your default way of explaining things makes you blame yourself in a really extreme way. And what was the idea about a disconnection between sensing and feeling?
That theory suggests a potential breakdown in the communication pathways between the brain areas that process sensory information, what you see, hear, touch, and the limbic system, which handles emotions. So the result could be that the world, or even oneself, is perceived without the usual accompanying emotional resonance. Everything feels flat, meaningless, unreal. And the brain, trying to make sense of this lack of emotional connection, might leap to the conclusion, this lack of feeling must mean I'm dead.
Wow. Okay, given how incredibly serious and complex all this sounds, what do doctors actually do to help someone with Cotard's?
Well, the primary focus is usually on treating the underlying condition that it's linked to. So if it's severe depression, you treat the depression. If it's linked to schizophrenia, you treat that. So medications like antidepressants and antipsychotics are often the first line of treatment.
And I remember reading that sometimes electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, can be quite effective.
Yes, absolutely. ECT has shown significant success in some cases, particularly when Cotard's is linked to severe treatment-resistant depression with psychotic features. Several sources highlighted its effectiveness. It can be a really crucial option when other treatments haven't worked.
It really sounds like it must take a whole team effort to manage this.
It really does. A multidisciplinary approach is key. You need mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, and because of that risk of refusing food and drink, nutritionists are often vital too to manage potential malnutrition. There needs to be careful planning around supporting food intake, behavioral strategies, psychological approaches, creating a calm eating environment. And in severe cases, sometimes temporary nasoentral feeding, using a tube, might be necessary just to ensure basic nutrition.
And therapies like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, they have a role too.
Yes, definitely. CBT can be very helpful in targeting the delusions themselves, helping the person identify those negative, dysfunctional thoughts, I am dead, my organs are rotten, and gradually learn to challenge and modify them. And of course, throughout treatment, constant monitoring for any risk of self-harm or suicide is absolutely essential. Safety is paramount.
It's actually quite encouraging to hear that, even with something this profound and bizarre. Recovery is possible.
Yes, definitely. The prognosis can actually be quite good with appropriate and timely treatment. It varies, of course, depending on the underlying cause and the individual. But Warren McKinley's story, for instance, is a really hopeful example. Finding the right support, eventually getting back home. Those were huge steps. And he even reached a point where he could look back on those beliefs incredibly with a sense of humor.
So let's try and wrap up our deep dive for today. Cotard's syndrome. It's clearly rare, but really significant. This profound belief of being dead or non-existent, it just highlights this incredibly intricate link between our minds, our bodies, and our fundamental sense of reality. And while the experience is obviously deeply distressing, it's good to know effective treatments exist and recovery is achievable.
Absolutely. And thinking about Cotard's really makes you pause and consider how much our everyday sense of self, our feeling of being alive and real, depends on this constant, seamless integration of sensory input and emotional processing. It's kind of amazing and maybe a bit fragile when you think about how a disruption there can lead to such utterly strange yet compelling beliefs. It definitely makes you wonder, what other kinds of interpretations might our brains construct if faced with a profound disconnect from reality?
That's definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for exploring this really fascinating condition with us. And for you listening in, if this deep dive got you curious, we've put links to all the sources we used in the show notes, so you can explore further if you like.